Were the Pharisees really the strictest interpreters of the Jewish law in the ancient world? Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and I've got an expert here on Jewish law to talk about this.
Hey, the answer is actually no, Dan. The Pharisees were not the strictest interpreters of the law in the ancient world. In fact, they were universally regarded by other groups as the most lenient interpreters of Torah. If we compare the legal rulings of non-Pharisaic groups to the legal rulings of the Pharisees, we can see why this is. So I'll give you 3 examples. So first, according to the law, if you carry a carcass of an animal that died of itself, that is, if it wasn't ritually slaughtered, you contract impurity. Now, the Pharisees believed that if you cut off the hide of an animal that died of itself and you can make stuff with it, that thing does not actually transmit impurity to you. So hides of carcasses do not transmit impurity. However, the evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which represent a different strand of legal interpretation, argue that the hides of animal carcasses do contract impurity. So if you find a dead animal and you cut off its hide and you make a flask out of it, you are perpetually contracting the impurity of that carcass. So in this instance, the Pharisees are lenient, and the Dead Sea Scroll group, the Qumran group, the Essenes are more stringent. Second, another example, the Pharisees believe that if you have a stream of water and something that's impure falls into that stream, impurity only flows downstream, but not upstream. But we also know that the Sadducees and the people at Qumran disagreed. They believed that any body of water into which an impure thing falls in, the entire stream or the entire body of water becomes impure. So again, Pharisees more lenient than the Sadducees and Qumran. Thirdly, we can see this in the Gospels in Matthew 19. The Pharisees, or at least the majority Pharisee position, was that Deuteronomy 24:1 permits divorcing a wife if she becomes unpleasant to the husband in any way. However, Jesus interprets that passage as indicating that a man may only divorce his wife on the basis of sexual immorality. So again, the Pharisees are lenient, and Jesus is more stringent in this case. So there you go. 3 instances in which the Pharisees are more lenient interpreters than the Sadducees, than Qumran, and than Jesus. And this is a pretty universal phenomenon that we see in polemics within Jewish law.
And so this would be why in, for instance, Matthew 5, we have Jesus telling his followers, your righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees. And then he goes on and says, you have heard that it is said, referring to the received tradition about how to interpret the law, and then he just ratchets it up because it's not good enough for him.
Yep, and he says that if you don't abide by his stricter interpretation of the law, you cannot actually inherit the kingdom of God. Pretty intense.
So yeah, that sounds like it's a lot more strict. The fit for today is LeVar Burton says read banned books. Where can people get more work from you?
Well, the fit for this video today has been Salmon Pink. But if you're interested in hearing more about Jesus' interpretation of the law, you can check out my podcast with my friend Paul Sloan called Jesus and Jewish Law, which is available wherever you get your podcasts.